All right, thank you for joining us today. We'd like to warmly welcome you to the Microsoft 365 Development Biweekly Community Call. Today is May 13th. My name is David Warner. I'm a PnP team member with Catapult Systems, and I'll be your host today, standing in for Vesa. So let's begin by taking a quick look at our agenda for today. We're going to review and begin with an overview of all the latest updates on all the initiatives. We'll remind everybody what resources are available to them. We'll take a look at the Microsoft Teams samples, and then of course we're going to have the optional picture time together. So we always look forward to that. Get your hair done. I know I got mine done. Then we're going to look forward to 3 amazing demos by Holland and Matt from Microsoft on how to transition to a hybrid workspace for the new workplace transformation site. And then we're going to turn it over to Paolo Pialorsi from PSys, who's going to cover querying and paging data with PnP Core SDK. And then, of course, the one and only Chris Kent will wow us with some list formatting magic. Of course, the opportunities to participate in this community is open to everyone. You can demo a solution or technical pattern. You can contribute on GitHub, and you can provide feedback. We always love to see everyone contributing by way of a demo. I know it's one of Patrick's favorites, as he says, and it is something that is available. So please don't hesitate to reach out and talk to anyone on the Patterns and Practices team. If you have a demo that you would like to present, there is no restrictions. As we saw last week, we had a 14-year-old providing a demo. So we invite everyone to provide a glimpse to the work that they're doing, and we certainly do appreciate it. If we look at our collection of resources, there are many. That we begin with the 365 developer videos and the community videos. We've got a number of open source initiatives available: github.com/SharePoint, PnP, Office Dev, Microsoft Graph, a lot of sample galleries, and we're working on a unified sample gallery that is going to be available soon that everyone can take advantage of to see everything across the world. So it's going to be fantastic. And all of these are open source and have an opportunity to be contributed to. And of course, if you're looking for a one-stop shop on how you can find all of these wonderful things, you can take a look at the aka.ms/m365pnp. That is the primary landing page for open source initiatives and samples within the Patterns and Practices umbrella. Extensibility within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem is fantastic and available. So if you go to aka.ms/m365/extensibility, it's going to provide you a glimpse of different ways in which you can extend the Microsoft 365 landscape. It is not something that you have to take just as it is. It's fantastic out of the box, but we certainly want to look to see how we can add additional extensibility to it and provide our own little flavor that's going to be of high value to our users. There is also a number of team samples that are available. If you're looking to get started with team samples, don't miss this sample gallery. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a few minutes with Bob German, but it is available to and by the community, and you are welcome to use the samples, reuse the samples, improve the samples. Everyone loves contributing back, and that's an opportunity that you can have as well. So aka.ms/team samples. Now, all these resources may be overwhelming. You may think, how am I going to get started with them? How am I going to contribute back to them? Well, we have an opportunity for you. Call now and you can get access to the Sharing is Caring initiative. This is an initiative by the Patterns and Practices team that provides hands-on guidance on using a lot of these resources and contributing back. The spectrum is pretty wide, as you can see from the upcoming sessions, from first-time contributor to creating community docs. In fact, that means that you can create brand new guidance documentation that you can see living at Microsoft.com. If you are more of a developer and you want to get started in that environment, then we've got sessions that will cover that information as well. If you want a demo, but you're a little nervous about presenting, we have a first-time presenter and, of course, our maturity model practitioner session. We've also started up the AMAs. Those are vastly popular, and so coming up in June, we have a Graph and MGT AMA. That's exciting, and a Teams Dev AMA. So be on the lookout for those. All these sessions are live. They're hands-on. They provide guidance. They're not recorded, so it's a safe space opportunity for you to ask any and all questions without feeling a little overwhelmed with whether or not it's going to be recorded. And they're all free, completely free of charge. So please don't hesitate to register, aka.ms/sharing is caring. Now we're going to get into the .NET libraries, and I'm going to pass the mic over to Paolo.
Thank you, David, and thank you everybody for joining this call. And yes, talking about the .NET libraries that we manage as PnP Community Project, you know, we have the PnP framework and the PnP Core SDK. The PnP framework mainly targets developers accustomed to play with the CSOM side of the world, and the PnP Core SDK is the new SDK that we introduced to have a completely modern and new development model. We are improving both of them constantly, and nowadays we are in version 1.5 for PnP framework. We are preparing the version 1.5 of PnP framework, and we had some nice improvement by Christian Zuling, Giacomo Pozzoni, and Bert Jasden, as well as by me. And in the upcoming weeks, we plan to introduce full support for the latest release of the PnP provisioning schema, which is the 2021-03, so the one of March 2021. From a PnP Core SDK point of view, again, we are working on version 1.2.0, which will be released most likely by the end of May, together with the PnP framework 1.5. And still there we have improvements made by, again, Christian Zuling. So thank you very much, Christian, Patrick Lambert, and Bert again. And stay really tuned, because we really plan to improve PnP Core SDK and provide additional capabilities. We are really proud because we reached 95,000 tenants. Now, I still remember when we reached the very first 10 tenants, and I think this is a huge number, and we are really proud of it. Still talking about the developer area, we also have the PnP PowerShell commandlets, and in that area, again, we are proud that we reached already 290,000 downloads, and on average, we make up to 75 million commandlets executed per day, which is a huge number, incredible number. We reached 25,000 tenants, and in version 1.5, which is already released, we added the very first commandlet to support Microsoft Viva Connection with the published PnP company app, as well as some other small fixes. And we are already working on version 1.6. Remember that the PnP PowerShell now is cross-platform, and it is targeting the PowerShell core engine and not anymore just the Windows-only Windows PowerShell engine. Talking about your teams, there are some upcoming improvements in that area as well. First of all, we released the preview 3.1.0 a few weeks ago, which includes the link unfurling capability. We fixed some issues, and we introduced the capability to create static tab for Viva connections. Moreover, we have on the roadmap some improvements on the documentation, the capability to create client-side only scaffolding with the tool, and support for HTTPS on client-side when you develop your solution. And generally speaking, a lot of improvement, like, for example, support for importing Teams App Studio manifest, as well as support for multiple manifests when you are in an environment where you want to develop a solution and you want to target the dev, staging, production environment, or multiple customers with multiple manifest files that you need to manage. So really great stuff coming out, and very soon we will release all of these capabilities. And now, Mike, back to you, David. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Paolo. Let's move into Microsoft Graph Toolkit. And for that, we'll invite Beth.
Hi, good morning. So we're planning for a 2.2 release at the end of this month before build. That will include the MSOT2 provider that supports multi-user login, where you can check out on the screen in the middle section, like how to install them. And then that'll also include some of the file components that connect to SharePoint file list and OneDrive file list, and with lots of configuration options. Feel free to try out these new packages for our 2.2 release, including all the bug fixes above in the latest updates. These are all going to be included. So I guess for those of you who doesn't know what Microsoft Graph Toolkit is, it is a reusable component library plus authentication libraries that help you connect and work with Microsoft Graph and accelerate your development. And we need people's help for testing out, what are the new features and bugs that you would like to help introduce or solve for the repo, and then try out the new things that's coming up.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. All right, Microsoft Teams samples, Bob German.
Hey, thank you very much, David. Yeah, I'm really excited about this sample this week. We have a new one from Seb Levere, who is in our own PnP team as well. And I like this one because a lot of people have asked me over time, how do I notify a user? If I've written a Teams app, I want to get the user's attention. I want to get them to come back into my app. And you know what? It's actually a little bit tricky. And I think my theory on this is that, and I can't speak for Teams engineering, but my theory is that they don't want a lot of spam floating around in Teams, and people will start shutting it off, so they make it a little bit tricky. You have to actually have an app installed, and Seb leads you through the whole process so that you can see how to use this great feature, which is really a combination of Graph and Teams. And so I invite you to check that out, as well as the fact that it also the scenario is a Kudos app. So if you want to build a Kudos app, here's the starting point for that as well. So there's a URL there. Also, tons of other samples available at aka.ms/teams-samples. And we would love to have yours. If you're working on something in the Teams development space and are willing to share your approach or your actual, obviously a working sample that exemplifies that, would absolutely love to have a pull request and make this totally comprehensive gallery of samples for everyone. So sharing is caring. Thank you so much. Back to you, Dave.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. Yeah, and if you are a little uneasy on how to submit that pull request, well, don't forget, sharing is caring. We're here to provide that opportunity to help you out. All right, well, it's optional picture time. So everybody loves this. So if you're comfortable, turn on those cameras, and I'll move into view our together mode. And we'll set up a recording for Camtasia. See if we can fill a few more in. Got everybody turning on, showing up. Excellent. Todd is next to me in the back dancing. All right, excellent. All right, still room for a couple more. People want to get in. All right, excellent. Well, let's begin the recording here in 3, 2, 1. All right, everybody wave. Say hello. It's always great to see all the faces of the community. Hopefully soon we'll be able to see everyone in person again, if that still exists, I think. All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, well, it's time for our demos. So we're going to turn the stage over to Holland and Matt. Feel free to take over, and they are going to show us how to inspire, inform, and prepare employees for a transition to a hybrid workplace with the new workplace transformation site.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Wolodarski. I'm joined by my colleague, Holland, and together, along with Katie Larson in our SharePoint design team, we've created some assets that we thought might be interesting to this community, of course, including a hybrid workplace SharePoint site template and some end user training. So that's what we're going to be sharing with you today. Just a little bit of setup, and then we'll get into the demo. I think something that we can all appreciate is, as a result of the pandemic, it's really changed how we've worked over the last year plus timeframe, and it's changing how we are going to work post-pandemic. You just have to look at the data, and you can see some of that here on the slide. Over 80% of managers surveyed expect to have more flexible work from home post-pandemic. And then more than 70% of the employees and managers reported a desire to continue working from home at least part-time. And so at Microsoft, we believe the future of work is hybrid. And really, the essence of hybrid work is extreme flexibility in terms of where and when people work. Organizations now are rethinking how work is going to happen at their companies. They're creating new policies, whether this means portions of the week people will spend working from home and some in the office. That's pretty common, as well as flexible working hours. So that's kind of the reality of what's coming post-pandemic. And as we return to the workplace, moving to the hybrid work model is not just about continuing this great work from home experiment that we've all been participating in. There is a need to change behavior, and that means developing new skills so that we can work in this new hybrid work environment. There's also a collective effort that is required for a successful transition to this new way of working. We kind of view it as an organizational change initiative, and how we guide people through that journey to hybrid work is really important. There are risks if it's not done correctly. People won't buy in. People won't have the skills necessary to work in a hybrid world. So that's kind of how we're coming at it, especially with this first asset that we're going to be talking about of the two, and that is a new workplace transformation site template that's available up on the lookbook. This is a site that all of you can install today into your tenant environment, into your customer's tenant, and basically, like other site templates, it's something that you can make your own. Hopefully we've given a good head start, and we'll go through a demo in just a second. But it's got lots of hybrid work related content. We consulted very closely with our Microsoft research team, and why don't we take a look at what is available. So I'm just going to switch up here. So this is the hybrid work site. I did kind of skip ahead where you can find it. There's a link in the deck. You can go to, of course, lookbook.microsoft.com. If you go into the solutions section, you'll find it as one of the options along with all the other SharePoint site templates. And then, of course, there's a direct link that we'll have in the notes that you can get to it as well. So yeah, let me walk you through this. I'm going to just highlight some key sections. What you're looking at here is the home site. We're really hoping that organizations who are making this move to hybrid work can use this as a starting point for their change site related to the hybrid workplace. So, a lot of thought has gone into what hybrid work means. Because it's about changing people's behavior, we of course have to outline what's in it for them. And so you'll see a lot of that throughout the site. But the homepage here, you can see it's broken down into what's happening. So what's the change, what to expect, what you'll learn. We've got some new training playlists that Holland's going to share more about in just a moment, as well as where to go for questions and support and lunch and learns, all sorts of good community type resources and champion programs to help bring employees along this change journey. So let's dive in a little bit more into hybrid work. This is a kind of a deep dive into what this means. You'll find some great illustrations and PowerPoint slides or PDFs that really outline what a hybrid workplace is. We even got some content, a great package of the week in the life, which I'll just quickly show you here. So one important part of change management, getting people to adapt to a new world, is giving them a vision of what this new reality looks like. So this week in the life includes this PDF that shows, what a typical week is for somebody who's moved into this new hybrid world, and when they might come into the office, what sort of meetings they might do in the office versus at home. So very useful, I think, if you're trying to give people a picture of what to expect. We have this getting started. As I mentioned, we view this very much as a change journey. So we've included a hybrid work checklist that organizations can, again, use as a starting point for their own change management program to guide their new employees. So there's activities here in terms of making people aware, giving them the knowledge, getting them to buy in, and kind of persisting this change. One or two other quick things, some quick tips on how to adapt to this new hybrid work, planning work-life boundaries, maximizing your internet bandwidth. So really practical tips to make hybrid work more effective. Okay, so with that, I'm going to now hand it off to my colleague Holland, who's going to talk more about the hybrid work training playlist that we've made available. So Holland, over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up a couple slides. and just walk you through our thinking behind the content that we did create and how it may apply to your organization and some different methods you can use to actually train end users on how to overcome all of these new challenges that are presenting themselves, both in the remote work situation and as we think about going back to the office. So what you'll see here on the slide is on the left-hand side, we've got sort of a landing page where we've created all this awesome end user content that can just be viewed at any time. This is on support.microsoft.com, as y'all are probably familiar with. And so content is available there. And then on the right hand of this slide, we're just telling you that it's also available in Learning Pathways playlist. So just talking a little bit about the content itself, where did we get the inspiration for this content and how did we know the different areas where users are going to need help? And so we're fortunate to have an in-house research team that's been studying remote work actually for years, it turns out. And they've got all these different sort of insights that they've gathered over the past year. And so training really falls into these three different buckets: meeting and collaboration, wellness and productivity, security and data protection. And so what we did is not only did we create sort of training content around these areas, but as Matt pointed out, in the site itself, we've got all sorts of inspirational content to get you going in the event that you want to use the workplace transformation site to transition your organization to hybrid work. So you'll see whispers of this training in the site itself. And then we've got those support.microsoft articles that I just pointed out, as well as Learning Pathways playlists for each of these sections. So what I'm going to do now is transition to the demo part of this. I'm not sure how many of y'all are already using M365 Learning Pathways, but it's a super cool tool. And a little bit about it, and in case you're not already using it and not familiar, is this is actually a Microsoft maintained content repository that's sort of like feeding into a tool that will display end user training for your organization. So what's great is you don't have to come up with the content and you don't have to maintain it. However, you can customize playlists to include Microsoft content and your own content. So there's a ton of flexibility with this solution. But kind of back to the hybrid work itself. So we've got 3 different playlists. This particular one focuses on that in that meeting space. We've also got a separate playlist for wellness, and we've got another playlist for data and security. So just to kind of give you a little sneak peek of how this all comes together, is all those articles that I mentioned that we wrote, we've sort of written into this really digestible format where it's just these really quick articles and you can sort of navigate right in the tool without having to leave SharePoint. And so again, we created all this content based on research findings and sort of like talking to customers and learning like where are the real pain points. And we just sort of like reverse engineered ourselves into end user training. So this is all available today. Highly recommend that you check it out. We put a lot of heart and soul into this content, so we hope you love it. Feel free to share feedback with us. And that's about it.
All right, I think I'll just take it back quickly to conclude and talk briefly about some next steps that you can do to get going with these assets. Okay, so we showed you 2 things today, one of them being the workplace transformation site template, the SharePoint site template. That's something that would really encourage you to install in your tenant. We've got the link at the bottom, aka.ms WAC workplace transformation site. So get that into your environment. It's free, play around with it, and share it with your colleagues and your customers. If you're looking for kind of a summary of what we covered today in general, including links to also the training that Halden walked through, it's that first bullet. Sorry, I'm starting from the bottom up here, but it was a blog post that I did when we launched the site, so aka.ms WAC workplace site blog, to get those links and learn a little bit more, or just kind of recap what we covered today. So hopefully that is relevant today to all of you, and something that you can put into your tool belt and use as you're helping customers or your colleagues make this transition to the hybrid workplace. So thank you. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Holland. This is really, really cool because as we go back to this hybrid environment, it's not just a matter of flipping the switch back on and going back to the office. There's going to be some newness that we have to get comfortable with and get used to. So this is really, really cool stuff. Very awesome. Really exciting. Going to be neat to share and actually collaborate on and share the information with everyone in the community. So nice job. There was a question in the chat that might be worth calling out in the video. Is it a modern or classic site? And that is a modern site. So just everybody knows this is a modern site. I think we're all starting to forget what classic is. So it's a modern world. So awesome. Excellent stuff. All right. Next up is Paolo Pialorsi, querying and paging data with PnP Core SDK. Paolo, take it away.
Thank you, David. And here I'm back again. Today, yes, we talk about querying and paging data with the PnP Core SDK. First of all, we will move to the demo environment, and I will show you how to work with PnP Core SDK when you need to query and page data. And then we will come back to the slide deck to make a recap of the ideas that I share with you. So this is a very simple console application which is using the PnP Core SDK. First of all, you need to know that whenever you want to use the PnP Core SDK, it is available for .NET developers in .NET Core and .NET Standard, because it is a .NET Standard 2.0 library. And in order to use it, you simply need to go to NuGet, and I would say the easiest way to get it is to download the pnp.core.out package, which includes the PnP Core package, which is the main one. In fact, the Core Out gives you the capability to have some ready-to-go authentication providers that you can use to speed up the process of using PnP Core and of authenticating against the target environment. Once you have done that, you have to configure a upsettings JSON file, or you can even use code-based configuration. Here in my sample, I simply configure that I want to use a target site in a tenant that I have, and I want to use the credential manager for the authentication against that tenant. Well, once you have done that, using the dependency injection model, because as I said already in the introduction about PnP Core today, PnP Core SDK is a modern library, and we decided to provide natively support for dependency injection. So here I simply create a host. I configure the logging services to show you what will happen under the cover while using Core SDK. And then I register as one of the services the PnP Core library with its own settings, which map to this section in the upsetting JSON file. And then I simply configure the core authentication, PnP Core authentication services to have the authentication in place. Once you have done that, you can run your hosting environment, and you can start playing with the PnP Core SDK. And so let's start having a look at the query model. Well, whenever you want to use PnP Core SDK to query data, first of all, you will need to get a reference to an object, which is called PnP context. And in order to do that, you can get a context through a factory. An object called PnP context factory will give you back an instance of the PnP context, as you can see, with an asynchronous development model. And by doing that, you can, for example, reference the name of a site that you configured in your configuration section. So here, test site means go to this site using this authentication model. And by doing that, I will get back my instance of the PnP context. Once you have a PnP context instance in your hand, you can query data with multiple techniques, depending on what you want to do in your solution. And here is the real meat of the demo. So first of all, one option is to load data in memory into the domain model objects that we already provide you through the PnP context. So for example, whenever you have a PnP context, you can always say context.web, and you will access the website in the current context, or context.site, and you will access the site collection, or context.team, and you will access the Microsoft Teams team backing, eventually backing the modern team site that you are targeting with the PnP context. I want to remember you that the main purpose of PnP Core SDK is to help developers creating solutions for SharePoint Online and Microsoft Teams using a library which has been created with a graph-first approach. So whenever you use PnP Core SDK, under the cover, we will do our best to use the Microsoft Graph and the Microsoft Graph endpoint to give you back your data or to provide you the services you're looking for. And in case there is a lack of functionality in the Microsoft Graph and we need to still use the SharePoint REST APIs, we fall back for you to the SharePoint REST APIs. But as I said, it is a graph-first library, so we always try to use Microsoft Graph as much as we can. So when I say load here, for example, I'm targeting the web object in the current context, meaning that I'm going to load what I'm requesting for inside the in-memory web object that I have. This will be a very simple way to dynamically load properties into an already existing domain model object. When you do that, you can then query the properties that you loaded, and you can use them, of course. In this example, as you see, I'm using a couple of Lambda expressions. So I say, for this object, I want to load the title and the lists property, which is actually a collection of objects. So what happens under the cover is that we will make a query to fill the collection, the memory collection. And as such, once you have the memory collection, if you want to use it, for example, because you want to browse it or you want to enumerate all of the items, you will simply need to say, okay, given the web in the current context and given the collection of lists in that web collection that I already loaded here, give me the requested list, meaning the one that I already have in memory, and let me browse through all of the items. And that's what happens in this code excerpt. Why do we have the as requested method, extension method? Because using this technique, you will guarantee that you will have access to the already in-memory collection of items. And I can run this application and show you what is going to happen here. So I just pressed F5. And now you will be able to see my console application running here. And let me put the Visual Studio Code just on the other side. So here we have the application. We did the startup, and we went through these steps: the load of the title and the collection of lists. And we wrote the web title on the console, and we went through all of the lists in the requested list of lists. And in fact, you can see here we have some HTTP requests targeting either Graph or SharePoint Online, depending on the target API endpoint. And then we get, in one shot, the title and all of the lists inside the current site. Now, if I scroll a little bit down in my code sample, we can see that here we just have a for each on the collection of lists of the web. What is the difference compared with the previous one? We don't have the as requested. It means that when we will do the for each on a collection in the Core SDK library, whenever you do that, we make an actual query for you in that point in time. So when I will press enter, let's see what will happen. We'll see we will have another request over the HTTP channel, and we will download a fresh new list of lists and libraries in the current web. And whenever you query a collection in the Core SDK library, we always make a fresh query for you. Like when you are, for example, using Entity Framework Core or stuff like that. So this is important. If you want to have the memory one as requested, if not, you will always get fresh new data. Okay? Moreover, we do support language integrated queries. So you can, for example, say, okay, context.web.lists, and you want to make a query based on extension methods to get the lists and libraries ordered by title, and with an extension method that we introduced in Core SDK, which is not available out of the box in .NET Framework, the query properties extension method will instruct our query engine to retrieve the ID and the title of every single list in the collection of lists. Right now, we do not support projection of anonymous types, and as such, we decided to use this technique, this approach. By using this query, you will simply get back an expression tree that you can enumerate whenever you want to get access to the result of this query. So here, we do not execute the query. We just define the query. We will execute the query when we will do the for each, so the get enumerator, against the expression tree described in the query. So again, let me press enter. And you will see that now we have another query, and we get still the list of libraries and lists ordered by title, and we get the ID and the title of all of those lists and libraries. But what if you want to use the language integrated query syntax? Well, you can do that as well. So you can say from L, for example, in context web.lists, you will get all of the lists objects in the collection of lists, filtering or partitioning the result by template type. And the constraint is give me back just the document libraries. So you see, we can have IntelliSense, we can have fully typed approach. We order the result by title, and we get the list items resulting from this query. And again, we want to specialize the query, just requesting the ID and the title of all of the lists with this query properties extension method. By doing that, again, when we will do the for each, so the get enumerator, we will execute the actual query, and here we just define an expression tree. So let me press enter one more time, and here you can see we get the 4 document libraries that I have in the whole list of lists and libraries of my site. And I think this is really cool because you can reuse exactly the same developer experience that you use when you work, for example, with Entity Framework, but targeting SharePoint Online and Microsoft Teams using the PnP Core SDK. And you have IntelliSense, you have fully tabbed approach. When you write a query, you can get help from the IDE of the Visual Studio environment to see what you're querying for. One more option is not only to do the load or the link query, but also to do the get of data. When you use the get approach, the result will be slightly different. When you use get will give you back a new instance of a domain model object that you will be able to use. So you will not load the result into the in-memory, already in-memory object that you have in the context, but you will get a new instance. Like, for example, if you want to create a specific new instance of the web object that you want to keep and reuse multiple times with some specific properties loaded into that object. Well, you do a get. Notice that we always have the asynchronous pattern, so get async, but we do support synchronous model as well if you like. And here we do get async, we get the title, we get the query properties of the lists, the collection of lists. So we retrieve the ID and the title of all of the lists in the web, and we will get back a new web object with all of these properties inside of this new object. And again, let me execute it. And again, we have the title and all of the lists. We can also do batching. Actually, we do batching by default in our library, so you don't need to think about batching. Whenever you make a request, it will be based on a batch request, to be fair. But let's assume that you want to have full control on the batch. Well, you can make a get batch async, for example, or a load batch async, either way. You can provide a batch object that you want to use and what you want to query. You can add multiple requests to the same batch. So here, for example, I'm saying, okay, give me a new web object in a new batch and also make a link query still as a batch query. And when you will do the execute async on the context, both of the queries or all of the queries in the batch will be executed. And again, you will be able to go through all of the items. So let me execute this one again. And as you see, when we do a batch, we can also see in the batch result if the result is available or not. So before executing the batch, the is available property that you have in the batch result is false. But right after executing the query, the batch result is available is true, and you can get access to the results of the query. So just to recap this part of the story, when you query data, you can load, you can get. When you load data into the already in-memory objects. When you get new objects. And you have 4 different flavors for all of them. The load async, the load batch async, the load, and the load batch, which are not the which are the synchronous ones. This one loads data into memory. This one gives you a new object with data in memory. You have the link option, and you can do nested and hierarchical queries if you like. Talking about paging, which is the last part of this demo, I think we did something really useful from a developer perspective. In fact, you have at least 3 options. Here we have a team channel in which I have something like 50 messages. This is my team channel with about 50 messages inside of it. And I get, with the load, all the messages in a channel that I retrieve using a first or default query, and I make a query for that specific channel. Then I can simply go through all of the messages. Notice then when we do the load of the messages property, we get back a collection and we can inspect the length of the collection. So if I will do that right now, we can get back, we make a query targeting Microsoft Teams, and at the very end, we got back 45 messages, which is the number of messages that I have in my channel. Well, if you do a for each like we did before with the lists, this will execute a new query and will give you all of the items. But as you can see here, I have an await for each. Why? Because the messages, as any other collection in the Core SDK library, is an async enumerable collection. And if you will do that, await for each on a collection, we will do for you the paging under the cover. So you will simply need to go through all of the items without needing to think about what will happen under the cover. But under the cover, we will do paging for you. So look at this demo. I will press enter, and you will see that I'm getting items in chunks. I get the very first 20 items after the first request, then another request, and 20 more items, and so on and so forth. And from your point of view, from a developer point of view, you simply go through all of the items with an await for each, so an asynchronous for each, and you simply get back all of the items page by page. We take care of paging for you. Of course, you can do that also with the synchronous approach without the await, because this collection implements also IEnumerable. But if you will do that, we will make all of the requests for all of the pages. And once those requests will be done, we'll give you all the items at once. Look at the difference now. We make still all of the requests for all of the pages. And once we are done, you get all of the items at once. It could look better, but it is not, because right now you will have to wait for all of the items to become available, while with the previous approach, you can consume them on the go while we make paging for you. Last option is to do a manual paging with skip and take. If you do that, you can target a collection, you can use the skip and take extension methods of link, and by doing that, you can easily create your own paging model, which is what I do in this last demo. So here you see, I'm still retrieving in chunks of 10 items per page, all of the items in the collection of messages in the team channel. Just as a recap, so you have the implicit asynchronous paging, which is the best one, in my opinion. We just do paging for you. You asynchronously enumerate items and you get them back. Remember the await for each. If you will not use the await for each, but just a simple for each, you will still get back all of the items with paging, so not stressing the network, but you will have to wait for all of the items to become available before being able to use them. And of course, you also have the manual paging if you like to do that with take and skip, and you want to have full control of the paging technique. That said, few links just as references, and at this final link, you can find the sample that I just showed you. And that's all for me, David. Back to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Paolo. Very, very cool stuff. Lots of love in the comments on the paging. So it's your favorite, and turns out it tends to be everybody's favorite as well. So very cool stuff. All right, Chris Kint is up. He's going to wow us with some list formatting and form formatting magic, where horsing around is encouraged. Chris, you want to take over the screen share?
All right, here we go. All right, I'm Chris. Good, moving on. All right, so let's take a look here. Go to our classic Warrior Horses site. And what I want to show you guys is, even the horses have issues they've got to track, right? So with weapons on the battlefield, sometimes they're unreliable, right? So they've got a whole issue tracking system. They've got a variety of ways doing it. They've got a mobile app, they've got a form, they've got all sorts of things, but ultimately everything ends up in this list, right? This is how they track issues with their weapons. All right, so they put them all in here, but there's a few things they'd like to do to make this a little better, right? So we're going to look at a few kind of advanced tricks we can do with the form. So we've talked about form formatting and some of the form customization options that we have before. We're going to dive in a little bit in a couple of unique scenarios and talk about things, a couple caveats. I'm going to use a couple of terms like security trimmed or read only, and those aren't really true. These are facsimiles, so we're kind of imitating that inside the form. So we're going to have a way to kind of show that way, but there's always going to be things like the grid view or the quick edit or the API or Power Apps, all a number of ways to edit these things and change that experience. So just keep that in mind, but these are really helpful tricks when you're just trying to get something done quickly, you don't have access to some of those other tools and so on. Okay, so that's my caveat. Now let's get going. All right, so let's say I've got these weapons issues, and on those weapon issues, I've got a form here. All right, little things like a title. Right, we've got the weapon, they've got to select that. That's a lookup field and some details about that. And then we've got a couple other fields down here, right? Resolution, comments, and a log, and serial number. So this log field, for instance, isn't something we really want anyone to enter. This is something that might come in, automatically when the item is created by one of these other systems, whether that's Flow, coming off a form or who knows what, right? So we don't necessarily want to show that log, or definitely don't want to make that editable. So we'll come back to that. But the first thing we see here is we got this share button, which on here we've got a calculated column. We've taken one of our samples, and all we've done is we've made it very easy to share individual issues. Obviously, that doesn't make a lot of sense in context of the form, right? Because there's other ways to do that, and it also doesn't even show our nice button. So let's get rid of this. So the first thing we can do is we can edit our columns. And mine are in sections because I've kind of laid that out here with the body layout, which we'll come back to. And to get rid of that, all I have to do is uncheck share, right? And now it's gone, and that's great. So what can I do with that, though? What else can I do? So what if I want to go a little further and I want to, say, take away that log field, right? I don't want that showing up either because I don't want people to edit that. So, oh, did I not save? Let's refresh. I've had some weird things with the column customization when you're using a body layout. There we go, it's gone. Okay, so we come in here and we want to edit our columns and we want to conditionally show something or hide something, right? So let's do that first with serial number. So serial number only makes sense if the weapon is, say, knife hose, right? So we don't need to show that if they've picked something like, a glue gun or whatever it is, right? So if they pick something else here, like a rocket launcher, serial number is not going to make any sense, or they're not going to be filling that out. So we're going to want to take care of that. We have some form refresh issues here, but we'll leave it on knife hose for now, and let's edit that conditional expression so we can take a look at that. So with our serial number, we edit this conditional formula, and what we do is we place something here that has to evaluate to true or false. Now we want to look at the weapon field, but that's a lookup. Now we talked about lookups on the last call, but there's some weird stuff with those. So if I take a look at, say, just a header, I'm going to paste in a really quick format just so we can look at what that might look like. All right, so we'll just come in here. We're going to go elm type is a div. We're just going to place something up at the top so we can see what that value looks like. We're going to say text content. And normally we would say, the name of our lookup column, and we would say lookup. Okay, so now let's take a look at something else here. Very briefly. What about context, right? So what if I were doing things like, let's just go ahead and close that, like this title field, right? So let's go column settings. I'm going to format this column, and we're just going to apply a very basic format here. Let's make that a little bigger so we can see it. We're just going to come down here, and we're going to add elm type div. All right, we're going to say text content. We just want it to be at the current field. And in this case, we're going to add a class. Attributes. And we'll add this guy, delete that guy, we'll go class. In this case, we're going to say it is MSBG color, just so we can see it, magenta. All right, so we'll make it a nice magenta color. Ooh, so pretty, right? That's absolutely what everyone should use for their title column, right? And that's okay, right? And I can do that, and we'll see if I save that and I open up the form, we'll see that same thing, right? But what if I wanted to display something differently on the form than when it's in the list view? All right, right now there is no true context, so as a format, I can't tell whether I'm on the form or not. But we can use a little trick here to kind of determine some of that, right? So in this case, we're going to look at this share column, which we know we don't have on the form. And so we're going to conditionally set this class. We're going to say equals and if. All right, so let's make sure we keep that magenta. So we want it magenta when it's on the form. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if, and now length, it just tells us on a string value like share, it's just going to tell us if it has a value at all. So in this case, we're just going to put share for our thing there. So we're going to say length. So if length, then make it magenta. Otherwise, why don't we do MSBG color, something obvious, yellow. That sounds beautiful. All right, we'll close that out. I'm just going to preview that. All right, we're going to skip that because I have no time and I want to show the other thing. But the idea here is there is a way to detect whether you're here or not by detecting what values are here versus what's in the form. Okay, so let's come back. There is a sample for that works, and we'll come back to that. Okay, so but first I want to move on to this other item, which I think is very helpful. It's this idea of kind of read-only sections here. All right, so we've got this idea of a section. So let's take a look. Okay, so we'll come up here. We've got these kind of sections here. We've got a problem and a resolution section, and that has been configured through our body here. So all we've done is laid out sections, a display name, right? And we've got a display name here. Hold on, I'm sorry to say. Okay, my son just lost his tooth. He's very excited to tell me that. Okay, I know, congratulations. All right, so now let's move on here. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the view only section here. So what if I want to take that log, right? We talked about that. We don't want that to show up. So if I wanted to say show that value somewhere, let's do our quick little header format. So we're going to say elm type is div, and we're just going to say text content here is the value of that, which is log. Like that. I'm going to hit preview on that. So now we see log up there. That's great, right? So hey, I could put it up there. So if I save that, and then I could remove it, right? So what if I remove that? Now I'm like, oh, just don't show it now. If I do that and I save, and we refresh because we still have access to that value, we open this up. We can see now I actually don't have access to that value because it's no longer part of the form. So how can I kind of troubleshoot that? Well, what we can do is there's a difference between unchecking the box to say don't show it. That'll mean that the value doesn't come back and is not available for our form formatting. Or we could choose to show it and put a conditional expression of just equals false. So we say this, it's going to have the same effect of not showing things. It's not going to show up, but what it is going to do is going to allow us to have access to that value. So now it's no longer part of the form. It's no longer editable. It's right here. So we could do something fancy, like first let's remove from the header because that looks a little silly, right? Let's preview that. Now let's come to our save that. And let's come down to our footer. And instead, I'm going to paste a part of a sample we have called the fake section footer. I'm just going to paste this here. It's a giant format, but what it's doing is it's imitating a secondary section. You say we got an extra line here. I can remove that here in a second. That extra line is if in case you have attachments enabled on this list, which I do not. So in this case, I can just say 0 here, and I'll remove that border. Let's preview that. All right, so now what we have is it looks like a whole nother section, right? We even have it looking like the field, but I cannot edit that. It's not clickable. It's not anything. So to an end user, it just appears to be a read-only field. Again, not really read-only, but if you've got fields that are only being entered, when you create the item, whether that's automatically or not, this is a really, really helpful tip. And you can use this to make it all kind of blend in and look nice. All right, and you can even do things like I'm just going to make 4 of those just to kind of show how this is all working. Let's paste this in. We'll keep our fake line in there anyway. All right, so now we got just 4 versions of that. And the reason we did that is just to show that when we refresh this guy, when we look at this, we get the same kind of stacking, right, as everything else. So as things kind of shrink, right, we get that same kind of wrapping behavior. So it behaves exactly like any of the other sections, but again, not editable. So a couple of things with that. You can't use the column formatter reference we've shown up before inside form formatting. So if you are trying to show a value that has a format associated with it, you're going to have to copy that in and adjust it. So it's a little bit of a pain in that regard, but it's still a really helpful trick for some of your more advanced scenarios. All right. So I think that'll pretty much cover it. And I'll turn it back over to you, David.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Share out the screen here and wrap up. The recording for this will be available in 24 hours. I want to thank all of our demo presenters today, Holland, Matt, Paolo, and Chris. Excellent demos. Recording will be available in 24 hours. You can always follow us on @Microsoft 365 Dev or @M365 PnP. The next general development call will be in 2 weeks, May 27th at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Next SharePoint framework development call will be next week, May 20th at 7 a.m. Same bat channel, same bat time. You can always see all of the different community calls that are available to our community: Adaptive Cards, Graph, Identity Platform, Teams, Add-ins, Power Apps, SharePoint, Dev SIG, SharePoint, Framework Civ, oh my, lots of them available. You can get them all at aka.ms/M365PNP. Thank you, everybody, for today. We'll see you next week.